awesome human geography students. So we are looking at our final video for Unit 1 today, and we are looking at 1.7 regional analysis. So our tidbit of the day is that St. Lucia is the only country in the world named after a woman. Our learning objective is describe different ways that geographers define regions, and there are several pieces to this. So we're looking at the basis of one or more unifying characteristics or patterns of activity, types of regions, regional boundaries, and applying regional analysis. Okay, so when we look at our Human Geography College Board regional map, we notice that there are several regions across the globe. So we have North America, and Mexico is kind of part of that, but it's generally considered largely more part of Latin America, which is more than South America. We look at Africa, and we have multiple regions in here. So we could look at North Africa, West Africa, Central, Southern, East Africa. But we also could look at North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, and notice on here that Egypt is considered more of a part of the Middle East. Then we have Central Asia, we have South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia. They don't even have marked on here. We have Russia, and then Eastern and Western Europe, or Australia and the islands. So regional analysis, we look at multiple scales. So we might be looking at a local scale, something really close to you or fairly close to you. We could be looking at a national scale, so more on the country rather than just a local place. We could be looking at a regional scale, so say Latin America or Eastern Europe, or we could be looking at a global scale, so comparing different parts of the world to each other. So we're going to look at types of regions, and regions are defined by having one or more unifying characteristics, so human or physical, or patterns of activity. And we have three major types, so formal, functional, and vernacular or perceptual. So vernacular and perceptual are the same thing. Vernacular would be referring to like the common way of identifying it, or the perceived way of defining it, and that's where we get that perceptual piece. So vernacular generally refers to language. The vernacular language is the common language that people speak every day, so it's the common way to look at a place. Perception, the way you perceive something. And if you look up here, we have two different types of maps. So on the left-hand side, we have a perceptual or vernacular map. And on the right-hand side, we have a functional map. And in this case, we're looking at the function of the different NFL teams. So functionally, how widespread is their fan base? So how far do they function as the team for that region? All right, so formal regions are united by one or more specific traits. It is formal, it is legal, that has some specific trait that everybody in that region has or uses. So it could be social, it could be political, it could be economic, it could be environmental. So we could be looking at something like money. We could be looking at something like they all speak the same language. We could be looking at something like they all have the same government. We could be looking at something like they all fit within that particular environment. So like an island. An economic region is going to have some unifying economic base. So something like the type of money, the type of trade, and in this case we're looking at the EU. So the EU has free trade within the EU, and it has a common currency, so the euro. A social or cultural region, we might have something like the Islamic world, and that is looking at the distribution of Muslims. So if we look at this map, we know that there are Muslims in the United States, but they're primarily clustered in Southwest and Central Asia and North Africa. For political regions, we're looking at something that is the formal legal boundaries of a place. So we could look at South America and the different countries there. We could look at the capitals. We could look at the different states, or different counties in Washington state. All of these are political borders. They have the same governments within those regions. We could look at Washington state as a political region, but now we can also look at the different counties in Washington state. We could look at a city as a different political region. We could look at the entirety of the United States as a political region. Then we have the physical or environmental regions. So North America. These are sometimes separated by specific physical boundaries like mountain ranges such as the Rockies or the Appalachians, or by deserts like the Mojave. Our second major type of region, a functional region. It is also called nodal, meaning it's centered around a node. And these are organized around a central node or focal point, and the relationship is typically based around economies, travel, or communication. So if we look at the maps that are up here, we're seeing where is that thing, where is that characteristic functioning. And if we look on the left-hand side, we see Kitsap Transit. And where Kitsap Transit functions is a functional region. Where airplanes fly, where particular companies fly to, airlines fly to, that's a functional region. Or if we look at television stations, where they broadcast, that's a functional region. Then we have perceptual or vernacular regions, and this is our third major type. And these are based on a person's perception of a certain location. So they are informal, they have a sense of place and a cultural identity, and the boundaries are often very widely varied because people have a different sense of what defines and unites that space, that region. So if we look on the one on the left-hand side, we see definitions of the South. Now, different people define the South in different ways. I'm from Virginia, and a lot of people don't count Virginia as part of the South. I do, but I don't necessarily look at Northern Virginia as part of the South, although where I'm from in southwestern Virginia, I would consider culturally Southern. But if we look here, we see 5 different definitions, and as many people are in this course, we would have that many different definitions of the South. So we see Confederate states, we see below average high school and college graduation rates, we see right to work states, we see winter precipitation exceeding 21 inches, we see more than 50% Baptist, we see last freeze before April 1st. And all of these are ways in which we might separate the North from the South, or the South from some other region. All of these are valid characteristics. It really just depends on what is your perception of the South. So sometimes they include Virginia, sometimes they include parts of it, and actually this one right here includes part of it that I'm from, and I would count. Parts of it include parts of Florida, but not the entire thing, and I would agree with that. I used to live in Florida. Parts of it only include this space right here. Parts of it include Texas or parts of Texas. I keep saying parts of it, I mean definitions. So sometimes different people classify a region or characterize a region as something different, someplace different than what someone else is going to classify it as. And if we look over here, we see different regions in the United States. And again, these have kind of silly different names on it. So we have New England, we have Foundry, we have Dixie, we have the Breadbasket, we have the Islands, Mex-America, Ecotopia, the Empty Quarter, and Quebec. And this is including, obviously, Canada. But we see very different definitions of different places. So Dixie is our functional South. That one's a lot different than a lot of these. It's similar, but it has differences. We have Quebec as an entire region that's really huge. We have New England as a really significant region. We have the whole of the breadbasket. That color doesn't really quite match, but that's a huge space. Then we have this empty quarter. So we have a lot of different definitions or perceptions of these regions. And think about for yourself, like, what do you consider the Pacific Northwest? Because most of us would agree Washington is part of the Pacific Northwest. Some of us might count California as it. But then we start to look at, is Spokane part of the Pacific Northwest, or is Los Angeles part of the Pacific Northwest? But Napa Valley might be, even if we don't consider the rest of California as part of the Pacific Northwest. Or San Francisco might be. So looking at these regional boundaries, it's important to note that these are transitional, so they can change, they're contestable, people can argue over them, and they can overlap. So looking here, this is kind of giving us a similar definition to what we were looking at a minute ago, where we have the Northwest. So now we're not Pacific, but we're just the Northwest as a whole. The Southwest, the Great Plains, Upper Midwest, Southeast, the Northeast. It's a fine line. Over here, we have the Northeast, but it's not quite as extensive. And then we have the Mid-Atlantic, so we don't have that one here. Then we just have Southern, South Central, Pacific Southwest, Pacific Northwest, Rocky Mountains, Great Plains, Great Lakes. Different regions that include some of the same spaces, but the regional boundaries are not the same. All right, that's it. That's the whole thing. So again, we are looking at different ways that geographers define regions. So I want you to take a couple of minutes and write in your notes and identify the 3 major types of regions. And then I want you to give a specific example for each. Then I want you to draw a mental map, meaning what the map that you see in your mind of important places in Port Orchard. And it's a mental map, it's yours. What do you think is important, or what's important to you in Port Orchard? And then I want you to explain why yours is different than mine and what type of region that would show. Okay? Once you finish that up, make sure you go in and do the reading, do the quiz, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay? Bye.